Namaste and greetings. I, Shweta, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Talk. We are gathered today for a panel discussion on cities, local governance, and interim union budget 2024 to 25 as part of IMPRI fourth annual series of thematic deliberations and analysis of interim union budget 2024 to 25. This discussion is organized by the Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies, IMPRI Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi, as a part of IMPRI Web Policy Talk series. I welcome all of you to this enlightening deliberation and thank you for tuning into this discussion. Now let me introduce the esteemed gathering. Our chair for the session is Dr. Rumi Aijaz ji, Senior Fellow and Head, Urban Policy Research Initiative, Observer Research Foundation, ORF, New Delhi. Well, we welcome you, sir. This session is moderated by Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay ji, Visiting Senior Fellow at IMPRI, an Associate Professor at the Department of Economics and Politics, Visva-Bharati University. Welcome to today's deliberation, sir. The distinguished panelists for the session are Professor Chetan Vaidya ji, an independent urban advisor and a former director of School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, and National Institute of Urban Affairs, New Delhi. Professor Vishwanath Alok ji, Professor of Public Finance at Indian Institute of Public Administration, New Delhi. Professor Kala Sitaram Sridhar ji, Professor at Center for Research in Urban Affairs, Institute for Social and Economic Change, Bangalore. Professor Mahalaya Chatterjee. He's a professor at Center for Urban Economic Studies, Department of Economics at the University of Calcutta. Professor Manjula Bharati ji, Professor and Dean at School of Habitat Studies, Tata Institute of Social Sciences at Mumbai. Joy Elamonji, Director General at Kerala Institute of Local Administration, Thrissur. Dr. Javed Alam Khanji, Thematic Lead, Fiscal Decentralization, Center for Budget and Governance Accountability, New Delhi. Professor Tatagat Chatterjee, Professor of Urban Management and Governance at Xavier University, Bhubaneswar. Mr. Samir Unhaleji, Visiting Senior Fellow at IMPRI, Urban Expert. Welcome, everyone. We look forward to learning from our esteemed gathering. Now, without any further ado, let us start the program. It is my honor and privilege to invite Dr. Rumi Aijaz ji to start the program with the chair's opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, everyone. And Shweta, thank you very much for the good introduction. Greetings to the distinguished speakers and the participants in today's webinar or panel discussion. As you know, this is an interim budget and the final one will be presented in about 3 months' time from in the month of July after the conduct of general elections in the country. So we would be looking to maybe a revised budget at that time with some more additions into the budgetary allocations. I was looking at the budgetary allocations data sheet, and as you might are already aware, it's more or less described, or all of the heads are more or less the same except for a few additions in that data sheet. From what I understand is that there are allocations for establishment expenditure, which is basically the costs involved in running the secretariat and the various attached offices, autonomous organizations like TCPO, NIUA, DUAC, or the National Capital Region Planning Board. And then within that category, there is one provision called Grants and Aid for Training of Municipal Employees, which is a very important provision in the budget. Then there are allocations for central schemes such as the MRTS and the metro projects, and also another head on transfers to state governments and union territories of India for implementation of various centrally sponsored schemes, such as the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Urban, Swachh Bharat Mission Urban, and Livelihood Mission, the Smart Cities Mission, and Amrut program of the Government of India, of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So when I look at these budgetary allocations, like some inferences can be drawn from the amounts allocated. And in my understanding, you may please correct me if I have misunderstood something from the budgetary documents. My first observation is that there is an increase in the allocation for Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. And this is an increase from about 693 billion rupees to about 775 billion rupees in the last, when we compare it with the previous year. It's an increase of 12%. And when I look at it, what I understood in the previous time when we had a similar discussion on the budget, then I observed that it was an increase by 3%. So I think there has been a substantial increase in the allocation of the budget of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, which I see as a positive step for all those who are concerned about urban affairs and urban issues. The second observation, going down further in this, of the overall allocations, the share of Prime Minister Awas Yojana Urban and the share of MRTS and metro projects is comparatively more than other programs. And I see that the share of both these aspects, PMAYU and metro projects or MRTS, is about 33% each, 32, 33% each for these two aspects. And then a little lower contributions for schemes such as Amrut and Swachh Bharat Mission Urban. Amrut, I understand its share in the total budgetary allocations is about 10%, and for Swachh Bharat Mission Urban, it's about 6.5%. So these are the most significant schemes of the Urban Ministry, PMAYU, MRTS, Amrut, and Swachh Bharat Mission Urban, which have received allocations. Now, when we look at the percent change from the last year, which is, we often say, growth rate. And when we look at these various programs or the schemes of the Government of India, the highest or the maximum or the highest growth rate is observed in the case of Swachh Bharat Mission Urban and Amrut program. In the case of Swachh Bharat Mission, I find that the amount has nearly doubled from 2,500 crores to 5,000 crores, or in billions, if you understand, 25 billion to about 50 billion rupees for Swachh Bharat Mission Urban. And obviously a negative change or a decrease in proportion or amounts is observed in the case of the Smart Cities Mission. I think the mission is going to end this year. They say every year. I think it's going to conclude this year because many other initiatives are already underway, to which greater attention will be paid in the coming years. So Smart Cities Mission has been there for about 9 years, and a lot of work. I've been closely following the progress of the mission, and my assessment is I will I will share my observation on this towards the end of the program. But I see a lot of projects were implemented under the mission, Smart Cities mission. Now, other observations are that lowest allocations are for the livelihood mission. And there is some increasing allocation for Pradhan Mantri electric bus Seva scheme. So this is also electric vehicles is going to come up in a big way, according to the Government of India and Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. The situation on the ground could be different because it's the people who will decide their preferences and depending upon their affordability for various such schemes that are being floated. Then within this budgetary allocation sheet, I find allocations for capacity building in urban transport, street vendors fund. Then there is a scheme called CITIIS, City Investment to Innovate, Integrate and Sustain 2.0 program, and the National Urban Digital Mission. So there are all of these aspects to which attention is being paid. When we were hearing the speech delivered by the Honorable Finance Minister of India, Srimati Nirmala Sitharamanji, there was a reference to the 4 communities that the Prime Minister of India had previously highlighted or flagged, to which greater emphasis or attention is going to be paid in the coming years. The poor, the women, the youth, and the farmers. And in this case, reference was made to street vendors, tribal groups, crafts persons, artisans, differently abled persons, transgender people. These groups are being assisted and supported in various ways in terms of starting an economic activity or support in their education or skill building, etc., etc. And then there was reference to the gift program, which is underway in the state of Gujarat, Gujarat International Finance Tech City, where a lot of work is going on to develop it as an important international financial center, providing financial services to companies from various parts of the world and also India. And then there was a reference to the strategy to support micro, small, and medium enterprises, rooftop solar power, housing for middle class, infrastructure development. So now coming to the urban, before I conclude, there was a small section on urban within the speech of the finance minister, in which 3-4 points are covered or emphasized. One is expansion of metro rail and Namo Bharat. So honestly, I was not familiar with Namo Bharat. There are so many terminologies, and then I understood that it has to do with regional rapid transit network or services, which work on which has already begun in the country. There is a corridor being developed to connect Delhi and Meerut, and part of the section has undergone a trial run of those fast rail services. And then there was mention to transit-oriented development, and then expansion of the EV ecosystem, especially the manufacturing of electric vehicles in the country and the provision for charging facilities, providing lots of charging stations, etc., in various parts of the country, and adoption of electric buses in public transport services. And finally, there was reference to development of tourist centers. So to conclude my opening remarks, most of the things are being carried forward from what has been happening in the past. I find 3 new emerging areas or challenges which are grappling the Government of India or the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. One is to do with green energy. And there is a lot of emphasis on introduction of solar power, rooftop solar panels, and systems or infrastructure being created. The second thing is about electric vehicles. I have conducted 2 in-depth studies at my place of work on the progress of electric vehicle or the EV mission, or the national mission on electric mobility in the country. And I will share my observations. And the final thing that I see from the budget is the emphasis on the national urban digital mission. There is a whole lot of scope of incorporating or utilization of technologies in various urban sectors for better impact of government initiatives, reaching a greater audience or population. I see other nations ahead than India who are talking about an advanced level of digitalization occurring in their country, and various sectors are benefiting, whether it's transport or health, in terms of provision of services, in terms of better management of these services. So India too is thinking about developing these sectors, and I think over time, substantial progress will be achieved. Now, without taking further of my thoughts ahead, I would like to once again join IMPRI in welcoming the distinguished panel of speakers. And I would like to invite the eminent speakers. They are or have been working with very important and reputed organizations and institutions in the country. They carry a lot of knowledge, and they have been sharing all of this knowledge and making a contribution in this field of urban studies. And the audience that's present in today's gathering would certainly benefit from their rich understanding and ideas. I would like to begin with by inviting Professor Chetan Vaidya, who has been gaining experience by working in various organizations of the country, whether it's the National Institute of Urban Affairs or the School of Planning and Architecture. And in his present capacity as an independent director of GIFT, where he has been devoting time and contributing. I would like to invite you, sir, to give your remarks as to what do you think about this budget. Is it a good budget? Do you think scope for improvement? Are certain sectors or aspects have been overlooked, to which attention needs to be paid by the, as Government of India revises the budget in the next round? Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rumi. And thank you, Arjun and IMPRI, for this opportunity. I think you have given a very, yes.
Just a little intervention. Shweta, would you like to say something? Would you like to formally introduce Professor Vaidya?
Sure, I can do. So we have Professor Chetan Vaidya ji, an independent urban advisor. He's the former director of School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, and also National Institute of Urban Affairs, New Delhi. Welcome, sir.
You want me to start, Rumi? Should I?
Yes, sir.
Rumi, thank you. Thank you, Rumi. Thank you, Shweta. Thank you, Arjun, and thank you, IMPRI, for this opportunity. I think this budget is for a few months, and we should always look at it as a short-term measure. But if you look at all the allocations and the things which have been focused, I think what it says that the government believes that what they have been doing is in the positive direction. Of course, there have been reduction in funds for smart city numbered almost by 20%, but I believe these two will end in June. At least smart city is definitely ending in June. And another important thing, which, as you have mentioned already, is that Clean India or Swachh Bharat mission allocation has been increased substantially, which is very positive. Unfortunately, National Livelihood Mission is once again not getting the importance it deserves, but part of it is taken care by the street vendors scheme, which should cover part of this NULM. So that is the broad story. I also agree with you. The very important areas or challenges are green energy, electric vehicles, and National Urban Digital Mission. I think National Urban Digital Mission has been set up in NIUA, I mean, with the support of ministry, and they are having dialogues and MOUs with different states to have some kind of compatibility of information from different local bodies and states, and then at the national level, which is extremely positive. I think green energy already we are doing a lot of things, and recently the Prime Minister announced, and the PM announced the scheme uh, for promotion of rooftop solar energy and a certain amount of free electricity to the households, which is very positive, and subsidy for rooftop. And second thing, which another important scheme, which details have not come out, is housing for middle class, either to buy or to rent. That is also a very important new scheme, which will have a lot of effect on real estate, particularly on the affordable housing scheme. At this moment, Rumi, I would like to mention the impact of, we should not look at isolation this budget. I think there's also a parallel allocation being provided by 15th Central Finance Commission. And they have been focusing on improving property tax. And I understand with a study by Janagra that 70% of urban local bodies have improved their property tax collection in the last 3 years. I think that's a very important thing. And almost a very huge amount of money is linked to this CFC performance grants. I think we should look at it in overall. On the other hand, I think it's a time for urban local bodies to develop a plan where they combine all these schemes together. Unfortunately, different ministries, you call it climate change. I think something is happening in climate change ministry, something is happening in home ministry on disaster management, something is happening on heavy engineering ministry, something is happening on non-conventional energy ministry. So we need to put it all together by the mayor or by the commissioner at one place, and then look at it what each city needs. Each city has a specific requirement. What kind of grants are available, what kind of schemes are available at the state level, and how do they, what are the priorities and what they should approach first. I think that is the strategy which, so that you have options, but you also have opportunities. I think that is something which needs to be emphasized. This is my comments at this moment. We'll happy to come back again if there are any specific question by you or the panel members.
Thank you very much for your comments. I think the points that you drew our attention to on the parallel initiatives that are underway are equally important, and the budget has to be seen in the light of those, because though those two are making a lot of contribution in terms of changing the face of towns and cities of India. Thank you. I would like to move forward in the program and would like to invite Professor Kala Sridhar, who works with the Institute for Social and Economic Change in Bangalore. Ma'am, please give your comments. Shweta, you may like to introduce her too.
Yes. Very warm welcome, Professor Kala Sitaram Sridharji. Professor works at the Center for Research in Urban Affairs at the Institute for Social and Economic Change, ISEC, Bangalore. Welcome, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shweta. I hope everybody is able to hear me. So thank you very much, IMPRI, Dr. Arjun Kumar, Shweta, Dr. Rumi, and for this opportunity to discuss the interim budget. And dear distinguished panelists, Professor Chetan, Professor Mahalaya, Professor Tathagat, and all my distinguished co-panelists, it's a delight to see all of you again. And since Dr. Rumi, I noticed, went into a lot of the allocation details on the National Urban Livelihoods Mission and all that, I will not get into all of that. What I will do is I will just focus on the broad thrust on urban transformation the finance minister made in her interim budget speech and focus on just 3 or 4 important key policy measures and just evaluate and assess them against the backdrop of my own research with regard to those aspects. And one thing which I noticed, I mean, an interim budget is a vote on account, and just so that the government avoids a shutdown, and it has to have some a finance bill and approval to borrow and spend from the Consolidated Fund of India. So it is really incremental from that point of view. I mean, really temporary from that point of view. But anyway, as Charles Lindblom has said, that basically all policy should be incremental. And I was delighted to note that in the context of Vikasit Bharat, right? Developed nation, India becomes a developed nation by 2047. In that context, the finance minister adequately emphasized the importance of urban transformation. I say this because we know that no country has reached a per capita income of $10,000 without at least becoming 60% urban. Okay, so this is really of great delight to me. That's what I noticed. And what I noticed here was that there are about 3 policies on which I would like to focus. I think the finance minister basically talked about micro, small and medium enterprises, MSMEs. And 2, that has a very important implication for balanced urban development, as I will demonstrate. And she also talked about this Uday Desh Ka Aam Nagrik, right? UDAN, the air connectivity to small and medium-sized towns of the country. And as Dr. Rumi rightly emphasized, the recognition of the metro rail and also Namo Bharat. I was also not sure what that is. Now, after Dr. Rumi said, I'm also a little bit clearer. Now, why is this important? Why are the MSMEs and the metro rail and also this UDAN important for urban development, right? See, actually, urban development in Indian states, especially a couple of southern states, is characterized by extreme urban primacy. In Telangana, for example, Hyderabad is nearly 10 times the size of the second biggest city, which is Warangal. And in Karnataka, Bangalore is a primate city in that as of 2021, the estimated populations show that Bangalore is 10 times the size of the second biggest city, Mysore, right? We need to have more even and balanced urban development. And in some related research, which was funded by the Government of India's ICSSR, Indian Council of Social Science Research, what we found was that the MSMEs per 100 population employment has a very positive effect on urban concentration. That's what we found. So basically what this means is that if you can encourage the growth of MSMEs in smaller and medium-sized towns, we can encourage urban concentration there. And that way reduce urban primacy of large cities like Bangalore or Hyderabad or Chennai or other cities, as the case may be. Right now, the primacy is very severe in the southern cities. That is one aspect that I would like to point out. So from this point of view, I think this budget, the interim budget, although it's interim and temporary in nature, I think it has really struck the right nails in terms of distributing the benefits of urban development across space really in a great way. So that is one thing that I would like to appreciate. Now, the other part that I would like to point out is the UDAN. So what is so special about UDAN and air connectivity, regional connectivity to smaller cities and towns? We know that based on theory, empirical evidence and international evidence from other countries that wherever the infrastructure is weak, urban primacy is strong. Wherever infrastructure is strong and connectivity is good, urban primacy is weak. So from this point of view, what we have done, what we find is that UDAN, which basically ensures air connectivity to a number of small and medium towns, will basically have the effect again of reducing urban primacy and ensuring balanced regional development. And in some research, we have also found that there is agglomeration effect, which means that the closer a small town is to a large city, the higher its economic output is, and vice versa. So what we find with UDAN is that smaller towns will be able to connect to larger cities much more rapidly, which will increase their agglomeration economies and economic output and productivity, right? Which is good for the economic growth and economic efficiency of these cities and towns. The last aspect of the budget that I would like to emphasize is the metro rail, as Dr. Rumi rightly highlighted at the beginning. So I'm really very thankful to him because he kind of set the broad tone and the overall framework within which the budget was presented. So metro rail, why is metro rail important in large cities? See, in large cities, the main emphasis, I mean, because in some research which I've just completed as part of my Fulbright fellowship at UCLA, this paper is forthcoming in the Elsevier journal Cities. There we find that Indian cities have suburbanized significantly, right, during 1975 to 2015. Okay. So what this means is that Indian cities have become flat and they are kind of sprawling, right, in terms of their spatial area and also population in the peri-urban and the suburban areas. So this means that basically travel time in cities like Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, Chennai has increased tremendously. And this is really bad for economic efficiency because the city's effective labor market ensures that a lot of jobs, the maximum number of jobs are accessible within a certain commute, within a 1 hour commute. So as the city grows, keeps growing bigger, it's a very big challenge for the urban local bodies and the policymakers to ensure speedy and inexpensive access to these jobs for the city to continue to remain inclusive, right? If the jobs have to be accessible to a majority of the population, the metro rail, which the finance minister emphasized, does precisely that. I think it's great because in large cities, the metro rail needs a lot of emphasis because in Bangalore also we found that the one-way travel time after the introduction of the metro in 2014 decreased from actually 40 minutes in 2001 to only about 28 minutes in 2018 based on primary surveys that we did as part of a study for the Indian Council of Social Science Research. So I don't know how much of time I have, but these are the only 3 aspects that I would like to comment in depth. And I think the finance minister did a great job of balancing economic efficiency, the political economy, and also the incremental nature of the interim budget. And if the same government comes into power, I think we are all set because the kind of policy agenda for urbanization and urban transformation will be seamless. And I really do hope that India will become a developed country by 2047, along with its associated benefits. Thanks a lot. I stop at this point, but I'm open to any questions and comments later as part of the Q&A. Thank you, Dr. Rumi.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Professor Sridhar. I think you have very valuable lessons for students of regional planning. You covered some very important aspects that have to do with economy and connectivity, whether it's MSMEs, development and growth in smaller order urban centers of the country, and the 2 aspects related to connectivity, metro rail or RRTS, and the air connectivity. I think these have great ability in addressing the challenges that India is experiencing today, including that of lopsided urbanization or agglomeration or heavy concentration of population and economic activities in certain regions of the country. Urban regions are sprawling. You are absolutely right. The sprawl is also observed in, for example, Chinese cities, but they have paid attention to the aspects that you mentioned. There could be other examples. I say China because I have some understanding and experience of personally seeing the kind of arrangements that the government has made for better connectivity, for reducing travel time, for ensuring balanced development of places. So I personally welcome your remarks. These are very good, and thank you very much for your participation and giving time to sharing your thoughts on this and bringing in your vast research experience. I think that was the best thing that you did to make it as realistic and practical as possible, and tying it with what the budget is providing for. Thank you very much once again. Now I would like to invite Professor Mahalaya Chatterjee, who is with the Calcutta University, and it's time for Shweta to introduce the speaker. If Shweta is there.
Yes.
Yes.
So we have Professor Mahalaya Chatterjee. She's a professor at Center for Urban Economic Studies at the Department of Economics in University of Calcutta. Welcome, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sita, for the nice introduction. And thank you, IMPRI, for inviting me. Rumi has given a very nice and short introduction of what has happened in the interim budget. And as we all know, this is the interim budget. This is a vote on account, actually. So we must not have much expectation from this budget. And what my previous speakers have said, I have also to that if you look at this, there is not much thing separate except for the missions and others, which Rumi has already said that a large allocation has been made to Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, Metro Rail, Amrut, etc. National Urban Livelihood Mission and Smart City Mission is going down for some reason or other. But for the others, there are allocation. Now, if we accept that urban is not a closed thing, whatever is happening around urban and whatever is happening in the country will have its effect in the urban area, then we must admit that this is in this voting account, that aspect has been highlighted. That the other things that even like Rumi, I didn't have any idea what is Namo Bharat. I checked with that what happened to Namo Bharat and what is Namo Bharat and how it is related to Metro Rail. Well, for this voting account, there is much emphasis on infrastructural development. And as we all know, as India's urbanization is going on, it's basically a transit-oriented development and so to say, a transit-oriented development, and whatever is happening with this infrastructural development like Namo Bharat, like Metro Rail connectivity and other things, it will affect urbanization. It will affect urbanization. Kala has already talked about the urban sprawls, and I would like to add with that hasn't the time has come for us. Of course, interim budget, vote on account doesn't talk for it. But if we go for a bigger budget later in this year, in June or other, I think the time has come to blur the difference between rural and urban and to think of at least some projects taking rural and urban combined. Because if you see that Swachh Bharat Mission urban and Swachh Bharat Mission rural, then what is happening to the areas which is neither rural nor urban, so that the peri-urban areas, they fall under one, they probably do not fall under any other thing. So what we see that the so-called Satcha is not there, and there are heaps of garbage dumped in the urban boundaries and others. And as we do it differently for rural and urban, the settlement planning is also being blurred. So we are increasing different types of connectivity in terms of Namo Bharat, in terms of extending metro rails, in terms of more speedier railways and others, all of them will lead to urbanization. Unfortunately, because the non-happening of the 2021 census, we do not have the idea that how urban has changed after 2011. What has happened, what will happen to the census towns, or the pandemic will have some reverse effect on urbanization or not, we don't have any idea. But the sporadic urbanization that has happened in 2011, if we think that whenever the census happens, we'll have an idea about the new census towns not only in the periphery of the metro towns and so-called megacities and others, but also in isolated areas, as was our experience in 2011. What will be the plan for that? I think this has to be taken into account when we talk of the impact of the urban. We have emphasized much on the transportation. This will add to urbanization. This will add to more and more urbanization. And this is not a case of only spatial spread in terms of sprawl. It is also a case of the new services required, new type of services required for urban areas, and the provision for that, the so-called local bodies equipping for that. So I think this particular budget should carry on as Professor Vaidya has already said, that many things are happening on the many ministries and others. This is a time for taking them under one umbrella in some form or other, so that these impacts of different projects and others can be assessed for urban areas, and policies can be made for checking those the so-called bad effects and others, and encouraging the good advantages. So let me stop now, and then I will continue if possible later.
Thank you, Professor Chatterjee, for your comments. I think you have highlighted a very fundamental issue or aspect that India and the Urban Ministry needs to pay attention to, that is to do with understanding how much of India is urbanized. And many of the programs are being run or conducted in isolation, and there is a need to have an integrated approach to addressing the issues of urbanization in the country, which is very important for ensuring best utilization of the funds that are happening from time to time. So, but your comments on emphasis on infrastructure development and the neglected peri-urban areas of the country are equally important, and I would like to thank you very much for sharing your views on this. I would like to proceed further in the program now, and would invite Professor Manjula Bharati, who is at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai, to give her remarks. Shweta, would you like to introduce Professor Bharati?
Sure. Yes, sir. So we have Professor Manjula Bharati ji, Professor and Dean at the School of Habitat Studies at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. Welcome, ma'am, and over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I would like to take a different tone to this deliberations that is going on so far. I would like to take something from both from the practical perspective and also from the ideological perspective of the local governance in the cities, and then the budgetary implications for that. So I do feel that the budget sets the tone for a political and economic directions of the government. And from that perspective, I feel that though interim budget is not directly speaking on the cities and the governance, it is very important and critical to look at it from its ideological positioning, and especially in the context of the rapid pace of urbanization like most of the speakers were speaking about, and India playing a lead actor in this process. And in that context, this discussion is very critical. And thank you, IMPRI team, for hosting this talk and also for inviting me to talk over here. And if you're looking at the genealogical perspective of the social organization, the society which has been evolved, I feel, from the city state to the nation state. And today, in a neoliberal governance of today, city has, I feel, the problems through the concentration of the wealth. We all know about it, the division of labor, the specialization, and the alienations. In today's, especially in today's context, this is coupled with when we are confronted with the climate change disasters and its perils in its everyday governance, because I am working with this climate change and the gender, and also with the climate change and the tribal issues, and how this everyday governance is affecting in the city governance and also in the rural governance. So how then, like the city landscapes, especially the life world of the vulnerable and the marginalized need to be understood. And we need to ask this question when we are really, there is no doubt that the certain spaces have been changing. There is certain spaces are giving a prominent spaces, but at the same time, we also need to ask, what governing techniques are developed for governing the resilience of the cities, especially for the marginalized and the vulnerable, and how do they align and conflict the daily practices of the city governance? So this question is very important. And is the interim budget, as a promising note of a political perspective of a government, is doing something to build the resilience of the community? And if so, how? So from that, what is basically when we're looking at, like that, since the topic is on the cities and the governance, the whole understanding of the city governance from the perspective of the local governance is on the principle of the subsidiarity to deepen, because like everyone saying about Vikasit Bharat, like Professor Karab says, speaking about Vikasit Bharat of, when we're speaking about Sabka Vishwas is also added, along with that Sabka Prayas is also added. So what is this Vishwas and what is this Prayas is also one need to critically engage with. And how we then we are speaking about a just, it is important to critically analyze this this philosophical understanding and the way in which the local governance, the city governance is moving from its, the epistemological shift to this, the envisaged stage as vis-a-vis, we have to understand the institutional framework and then the methods of governance that is happening in the city sites. So I feel in today's context, one of the important things that we need to also see about the whole the increasing unemployment, inflation, and social inequity and inequality, and climate change problem looming large in the social spectrum. And it is very important to see that how for example, if you're looking at income inequality, especially among the marginalized and the vulnerable population in the rural and urban areas, the Niti Aayog itself has come out with a report saying about, which has come out with a multidimensional poverty index, and says that 25% of the households were found to be multidimensional poor in India, which is actually 1/4 of the population. And then, if you're looking at from the perspective of this constitutional amendment of the 73rd Amendment, the local governance as per the 243G, 243W, and 243 is it read along with, the schedule 10, 11, and 12 to plan and implement schemes and policies of economic development and social justice. So as a social scientist who is actually working with the women, with the tribals on the issues of climate change and the issues of urbanization for the past 10 years, the whole question of, after 25 years of decentralization, because local governance is the area that I am doing work for, the 20 years. So after 25 years of, decentralization, local government percent, than 4%, a number that is extremely low when compared to the major countries like China, which is like 11%, and Brazil, which is 7%. So from that, it is important to understand that when 18 functions are supposed to be devolved down with the ULBs, it is the current today the full authorities, it is less than 5, So then the next one which I would like to bring about is another area of my research is localizing sustainable development goal. So the areas that I'm working in Maharashtra, in the rural and the urban spaces, which I'm trying to work with panchayat and also with municipality corporations, how can we localize the sustainable development goal across this, because I'm trying to look at only 5 SDGs, looking from SDG 3, 5, 6, and 11, and 13, So how this whole questions about health, gender, SDG, then SDG 6 on water and sanitation, and SDG 11 on urban livable cities, and SDG 13 on climate change and resilience. So how, the localization of these SDGs is happening, and there also we can see the functional, financial, and the functionary challenges of this local self-governance. For example, in Maharashtra, we can see that the places that I'm going and working with the local governance, the people, maybe the Gram Sevaks and the Panchayat Samiti people may be having some understanding of the SDGs, but the community and the community collectives, and especially the self-help groups, the residents associations, slum dwellers associations are not even heard of the term SDGs, and then we are speaking about the whole understanding of the localization SDG. So how can we bring, when we are saying about 2030, how can we work with the localization, the rural and urban spaces, and especially like whole things about the peri-urban spaces, which is, like is almost now working as a no man land. So my whole question, like today, when you're looking at the existing vulnerabilities of the marginalized groups, including the workers engaged in the informal sectors, and their access to water, sanitation, health facilities, it is very important to see it also to that. And then as a person who is again working with women, especially women at the local level, the job opportunities for the women from the lower socioeconomic strata, for the example, the ASHA, the Anganwadi workers, and see, we have conducted and or either they are not getting honorarium or they are not getting incentives, So this is also important that when you're speaking about women empowerment or the women capacitation is one of the fundamental principles of that has been posed by the budget. What are the women at the local level and how we are looking at the women at the lower socioeconomic things who are doing considerable kind of work for the national development is being looked at. And then again, the budgetary allocation, if you're looking at that, for the SC, ST, marginalized population have come down. And also another important thing is that it's a substantial reduction in the expenditure pattern. So one thing is it has come down and there is substantial reduction in the expenditure, and both are quite areas of concern for me. And then the third most important point that I would like to raise is the whole question of resilience, because resilience is so important. So how we are going to build the resilience of the city spaces with the local planning, and how far we are able to do that, that is important. And so in that context, when we have a Disaster Management Act 2005, provide a framework for an institutional response in case of disasters, and giving the urban local bodies to have a greater role in the disaster management. But even now, the disaster management is also almost completely, in the earlier budget also has completely neglected the role of the local self-governance institutions in mitigation phases of the disaster. So that is important. And then to specifically looking at the interim budget this time, we, like the early speakers were saying about the central urban projects like Amrit and smart city missions, they are going to be ending in this March and June. And so it is important that, okay, the question when you're saying about, like I said in the beginning, Vikasit Bharat. So how, we are trying to look at Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, and now Sabka Prayas, how we are looking at it from the perspective of democracy, demography, and diversity. So the decrease in the budgetary allocation that has been given to the city missions, has come down something about 21%. So the whole thing, like that one has to look at, the whole second phase of now Swachh Bharat Vision, because it's really SBM, had received 150% increase last year, and we definitely expect a similar trend. And the other one which I would like to also speak about, the Urban Infrastructure Development Fund provided to the Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities in the last year. But if you're looking at the expenditure pattern, there is a very minimal utilization of that fund, less than 10%, basically mainly because of the lengthy process of the project. So you are having this urban infrastructure development fund mainly to the Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, but also we need to look at the way in which the expenditure is being given along with the budgetary allocation. What is the expenditure pattern of that, So I would like to end by saying that, okay, past experience show that, that the importance of this center as a welfare state in the development and then the implementations of the city governance is very important. And then see withdrawal of the center, immediately after you have the capex thing, and then asset creations has been done at the local level. But the withdrawal of the center immediately after the asset creation leaves local bodies seriously handicapped in the task of maintenance and replacement of a worn out asset. Their own budgetary incomes, we all know that, overwhelmingly dependent on the post-GST, on a single tax, the property tax, fails to fully support quality maintenance and find it even more difficult to fund the replacement of almost the atrophied assets. So urban governance, city governance, and meaningful administrative engagement with the 74th Amendment with the political commitment and integrity is the need of the hour, I do fully believe. And if you're speaking of a people-centric inclusive governance at the city level, where right to the city becomes not a dream, but a reality for the vulnerable and the marginalized to access and leave the space with dignity. It is important to look the governance not only from the political democracy. I do feel we have to look it from a social democracy, where the vulnerable and the marginalized, the urban and the cities need to get special attention, and the ways in which a neoliberal governance and governmentality takes the center stage of the governance discourses. It is important to see how budget can promise a people-centric, inclusive process of city governance. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bharati. You've highlighted some very neglected and concerning areas which require a lot of attention by the policymakers, planners, administrators. The points about vulnerable communities in the country and the kind of problems that they experience in their day-to-day life is a neglected area still, and a lot of work is needed, I would say. One would also need to understand the kind of initiatives and programs that the Government of India and various ministries and departments are running for the welfare of these communities in order to build resilience among them or to address the problems that they are facing. And how has been the experience of those initiatives? Because I believe that nowadays there are so many programs and schemes that one or the other scheme would definitely be touching upon the problems that these communities are facing, whether in the people staying in the core areas of the city or the peripheral areas of the city. And it is a major task or challenge for the actors involved in the governance process to find answers to these problems that exist. So your comments are all very important and valid, and I hope the situation or the impact of various efforts that are being made by the government are able to address the problems earlier than what people have been waiting for a long time. So I thank you for your comments, and I'm sure this, as IMPRI takes forward this work of documenting the report based on the discussion, these would form an important part of the entire documentation. I would like to thank you once again, and would like to move forward in the program by inviting Dr. Joy Ilamon, who is the Director General, Kerala Institute of Local Administration in Thrissur. Kila has been doing substantial work in terms of training of functionaries and various other programs that they run for the functionaries within the state. And more details would be shared by Dr. Ilamon. Shweta, please introduce the speaker.
Sure. Yes, now we have Dr. Joy Alamonji. Who is the Director General at the Kerala Institute of Local Administration, Kila, Thrissur. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Shweta. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
And good evening. Okay. yes, it's an interim budget. And I find there are no spectacular announcements, especially in this pre-election month. It's actually a little interesting to note that there are no spectacular announcements.
Dr. Ilaman, just a small observation that if you can lower your screen a little or raise, now the other direction. Yeah, this is much better. But now we can see you. Thank you. Thanks.
Is it okay now?
Yes.
Okay. So there are no spectacular announcements, but there are also statements in the speech. Say, for example, like deserving urban middle class to buy or build their own houses basically. And these are some of the sentences which come in through the speech. And we'll have to also see what this deserving urban middle class means in the future. But let us leave it like that. But then for me, the question is, how does it affect the federal nature of our country? And also, in that way, since we are discussing the cities and the local governance part, how does it affect the local governments and local governance? A simple example would be, what happens to the GST compensation for the cities and the local governments? And what is the status as of now? What is the position we have? What is introduced through this budget? I don't find anything now. But basically, my point is that it actually, overall the budget and over the years that has happened, actually it circumvents the basic principles of cooperative federalism. Actually, it is actually seeking to centralize the fiscal powers. So this has not started in this budget, but it is actually one step forward and overall leading to centralization. And for all of us, I think we are actually missing the wood for the trees. If you take one by one statement by one statement, sometimes some people might see that part, but we miss the wood. That is my point, especially in terms of local governance and over centralization. For example, I would say there is actually the decision to continue with the 1 lakh crores special assistance scheme for cities, for states, basically for capital expenditure. But you just go back and see how the central government, union government had actually denied this to the states. The reason? The states are not, they are actually reluctant to toe the line on branding of various schemes. For example, if I get a house based on my marginalization and other things, my house will have all kinds of things written, and it is actually questioning the integrity and the self-esteem of the citizen, and that the states will object. But then branding of schemes, and in that way, even when you have this 1 lakh crore scheme, you are not able to get it. The states are not allowed to get it. And this is where the question comes. See, when our National Planning Commission, Central Planning Commission was dissolved, and we moved away from the 5-year plan and the annual plan, if we remember, the states used to prepare their plan. Then we have the discussions with the Planning Commission, and along with the Central Finance Commission's recommendations and awards otherwise. That is the way it worked. Now, the center announces, and then the branding comes in. And there, I think, is the question. Whatever schemes you mentioned, the actual thing, what happens, is my real question. But then the next part is actually about the urban. Actually, we are in the urban century. We know that. Let's go back to the 2018 National Urban Policy Framework. I think that is the basis on which we are moving ahead. Actually, where are we? There are specific areas which was mentioned, but where are we? And the next issue is actually, where is the 74th Amendment in all these things? I am a strong critic of the 74th Amendment. In the last one also, I would have mentioned this, I think, is that 4th Amendment is an afterthought of the 73rd Amendment, and it doesn't actually, it has not actually taken off. we still have a Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs or Urban Affairs, not Urban Governance. Whereas we have the Ministry of Panchayati Raj. So this is the difference. I don't want to explain too much on this. We don't actually talk about urban governance and urban local governance. We never talk of. But anyway, that is the key point in it. But then when it comes to the next part of the thing, the challenges part of it, but another thing which I want to also mention is what is the status of CFC awards, the 15th Finance Commission award in the case of urban areas? Has anyone monitored it? Has anyone gone through it? Does the budget talk anything about the CFC grants which have been utilized or not unutilized by not utilized by the local governments, urban local governments? I'm talking about the urban local governments. There have been a good work happening in the Ministry of Panchayat Raj and through that. But on the other side, this is what has happened. So, for example, there is also the health grant. What is the real status? And when you go back in the practical way, you will find that the conditionalities imposed as well as the one size fits all has actually affected the actual utilization of all these awards and funds which are earmarked. And we have also forgotten the peri-urban areas. We also talk only about the cities, but cities and urban is not homogeneous in the country. It's heterogeneous, various types, various levels on all those things, which we have not addressed at all. But then the new challenges. This budget has actually not thought about the new challenges except for saying, for example, the climate change and the extreme events. We talk about the climate change through e-vehicles and other things and solar panels, 1 crore and other things. But what about the larger aspects of climate change and how especially the cities are getting affected? The heat islands are being formed. What are we doing at that? And the extreme events, for example, see, it is a reality that we have the urban floods. We have seen it everywhere, many places. And what is the position with regard to this? How do you address that? So how do you actually address the disaster risk reduction aspects of it? And coming to the sustainable development goals, the urban, the cities, where are we? People also talk only about the SDG 11, which has a word called cities, but the entire 17 goals are applicable to the urban areas. And how do we actually really localize these SDGs and see how it happens in every city? So there we will have to also see about the equity in urban development, where the gender issues come in, the child issues come in, the differently abled issues come in, so many things which will come in. And how do you do that? And especially in the case of urban areas, what is the position this budget takes with regard to migration and migrant laborers? See, that is one of the major. So you have seen it in the COVID era, what it means to all of us. And that migrant laborers as well as the urban unemployment. Urban unemployment is also not the same one, with the homogeneous one. We talk about the IT and other things, but urban unemployment is little more than that. And we have the educated unemployment as well as the semi-skilled laborers issues also. And have we ever thought about the fiscal health of the urban local governments? See, whether this budget has any direction towards addressing the fiscal health of the urban local, because we are talking about the cities. That is why I am talking. And is it not time for us to professionalize the urban administration? So, say, just to sum it up, as I started, I think since it is an interim budget, we are expecting a improved budget or the full budget later by the government, whichever comes in. But I think we need to actually think about, if you are talking about local governance and if you are talking about the urban local governments and cities, then we also need to see how empowered they are through this budget also. That's why I asked about the fiscal health of the urban local governments. Then we can actually think about these things. Many a time what is happening, again, even in this budget, it has come in that there are many schemes which are announced, but the states and the local governments have to compete to get that. See, that is totally different from what we had in the 5-year plans and the annual plans earlier. So that is where the major change comes in. And there, the weak becomes more weaker, weak becomes the weaker, and the strong becomes stronger. And there is a very corporatization of the entire aspect, because even if you want to have a competition for, we need to have the DPRs to be prepared. DPRs have to be supported by great agencies, which need to be paid. And so even in that, those aspects, slowly this comes in. So how I see, for example, the mega projects which are also being announced. What is the role of the local governments? What is the role of the city corporation? What is the role of the municipalities? And what stake they have in all those development? So that is why when I address it, whether it is, it is actually leading to overall centralization rather than decentralization of local governance, and where we need to actually move forward. So these are my initial comments on this. Yes, even if I go to the rural aspects, you will actually see what is, first of all, this budget, once we have started doing it on February 1st, actually we don't really get the expenditure statement for the entire year. So that whatever is it's a projected one, but whatever expenditure which is shown is actually towards the end of December. And finally, this February 1st budget is actually talking only about an estimation for the projection for the March 31st. And where actually, if you speak, even in the rural employment guarantee scheme or other things which have come in, it is actually going down. Most of the cases, it is actually going down. And I would also expected something for the urban employment guarantee scheme, which also I didn't find in this one. So thank you. These are all my initial comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ilamon, for your comments. The most important thing of interest to me in your comments was the point on need for decentralization. There's a lot of, you are absolutely right about the way things are unfolding. And it's important to decentralize various aspects, strengthen local governments, whether urban or rural, empower them in various ways, either through 74th Amendment Act or in some other manner, which would work for strengthening of urban local governments. But it's very important to prepare those local bodies in such a way that they are able to, because you are right, they are closest to the people, they understand the needs and requirements of their jurisdictions much better than what the center understands, and therefore many nations in the world, many places, they have transformed by adopting this approach of decentralization. And this is an important reason for India to seriously think more along those lines, where the responsibilities, the things that local governments need to function properly are at their disposal, so that the situation transforms for the better. Thank you very much. Although there is a lot of content in what you said, we will analyze, we will look at it. We learned a lot, actually. I learned a lot from your views, and I'm sure the other speakers and participants would have benefited from your ideas and thinking. You're absolutely right about the things that you shared with us. And I thank you once again on behalf of IMPRI. Thank you very much for taking out time to participate in the program. Grateful to you. I would like to invite the next speaker, Dr. Javed Alam Khan, who is based in Delhi. Shweta, please introduce the speaker.
Yes, sir. So now we have Dr. Javed Alam Khan ji, who is the thematic lead, fiscal decentralization at Center for Budget and Governance Accountability, CBGA, New Delhi. Welcome, and over to you, Doctor.
Hello, good evening, and thank you, Chair and IMPRI. So, like I have been the student of budget studies for last 20 years. And from my experiences during last 20 years and particularly during last 10 years, usually already Joy has mentioned that we always focus on budget estimate, but we don't go into RE, revised estimate, and actual expenditure in a great details. So usually, like with every scheme, with every department, most of the time, budgets are not utilized. And even they are utilized, we don't see the quality of utilization, timeliness. So these are the important areas, I think, which we should, focus more in terms of having greater impact and better outcome. I will, look this budget as a kind of the several announcements the government has been making, in every budget, and like Amrit Kal. Then now we are going into the, developed country, and several other, terminologies have been used. But from the local government's point of view, and especially focusing on the rural local governments, I would say that FM has focused on, promotion of SSGs, and then giving ownership of rural housing to the women, and then talked about the Lakpati Didi. But if you see the allocation for these, announcement and commitment, so I find that these are the mere statement. Just if we look at the allocation for the Department of Rural Development, so there is a National Rural Livelihood Mission. So I can say that this was the vote on account, but allocation is, as same as the previous year. And something has been increased under NREGA, but about PMAY and then rural road program, I think there is no, much increase in the budget. And especially I would say that there is a social security scheme which covers old age pension, widow pension, disability pension, which is part of the Ministry of Rural Development. And basically, it goes to also urban areas, I would say. But most of the people are living in the rural areas. So, in this scheme, I have been consistently following and observing the budget and also the unit cost of the services. So, everybody is saying that, yeah, by 2040, we are going to become a developed nation. I wish them for good luck. But, still we are paying 200 and 300 per month to, disabled people, old age people, and widows. And we know that large section of the population are residing in the rural areas, and most of them are depending on the PM Garib Kalyan Yojana. So you can imagine that, where we are now. Further, usually we try to link, union budget with the local government budgets. And Joy has already raised many issues, so I am not going to repeat those. But here we can say that Ministry of Minority Affairs is there. Sorry, Ministry of Panchayati Raj is there. Sorry, Ministry of Panchayati Raj is there. So, during last 10 years, I have seen that the allocation has been, gradually reduced, and it has, limited to 2 to 3 schemes. And we have Gram Swaraj Abhiyan, which is hardly getting, 1,000 crore rupees. And we, always mentioning about the sustainable development goals, and especially, we always claim that this country is a federal country, and there is a fiscal federalism. So joke apart, if we claim that SDGs have to be localized, and we have already, covered half of the period, and then the onus of the localization is falling on the Ministry of Panchayati Raj, and we have Rashtriya Gram Swaraj Abhiyan. It has so many components to strengthen the local governments, including the capacitation of the local elected representatives. But if you see the allocation and the mechanism, and I am closely connected with the ministry, so I find very difficult to say that any is there any seriousness on the part of the government of India, and especially when we are discussing about the union budget linking with the local government. So in that way, I would say that maybe we have mentioned some infrastructural project, but when we talk about the autonomy and decision making of the local government, so day by day their role is reducing, and even we forgot about the implementation of the 73rd Amendment Act, and even states have become a kind of municipal corporation. So it is also difficult to talk about them, but really there is a need to discuss about the people's planning and local budgeting, and how we can do some kind of advocacy with the central government also, and pressurize them that yeah, we have other units of the local governments. And as I mentioned that I have been working on part of the budget studies. So here I would say that gradually whatever centrally sponsored schemes were falling under the local governments, now they have become centralized, so they don't have any role. States are after the dismantling of planning commission and doing away the distinction between plan and non-plan fund. I think the devolution of fund from the states have got stopped. So except Kerala and Tamil Nadu, I would say that there is nothing at the level of local government, whether whatever funding they are getting in terms of central sector schemes, centrally sponsored schemes, and also they don't have much role in terms of control over expenditure. GPDP is there, that is the baby of the union government, but what is the use of that GPDP if they are not getting the predictable fund? Whole entire line departments are controlling the show. So here I will stop, and thank you so much to discuss about the local government, and I am here to take any question. So thanks IMPRI and Rumi sir.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. I think your comments were quite good. They were extremely relevant. It's important to ensure that rural areas develop. It's good for the health of urban areas, for rural areas to develop properly. There's a lot of neglect on that front still existing in the country. And if you think that sufficient allocations are not being directed in that on those aspects, then it is a cause of concern or cause for worry. Yours another point was equally important about how local budgets are prepared, whether the rural governments and urban governments, how much of participation approach do they adopt in preparing their budgets? Is it a participatory budget? Because unless that approach is adopted, the concerns and needs of the citizens within the jurisdiction of those governments might not be addressed. There is a risk of that if budgets are prepared irrespective of the needs and concerns of the people. So that is you're right, it's a gray area, and there should be some work done in this direction. If some work has been done, then those lessons learned should be shared with the wider community, so that important lessons can be derived through such exercises. So I I think your points are very good, extremely valid for today's discussion, and thank you very much for the time. I would like to invite my dear friend, Professor Tathagata Chatterjee, and it's time for Shweta to introduce the speaker.
Yes, sir. So now we have Professor Tathagata Chatterjee, who is a professor of urban management and governance at Xavier University, Bhubaneswar. Welcome, Professor, and over to you.
Thank you, Shweta. Thank you, Arjunji, IMPRI, and Dr. Rumi for the opportunity to come and discuss. My views, I would say that, I mean, some of these points had also been already mentioned by other speakers. So this being an interim budget, so there are a lot of limitations. But nevertheless, if we think about this budget and try to analyze, not just going into the smaller issues of allocations, which Dr. Rumi has earlier given a very nice introduction. But if we look at the bigger overall picture about what does this budget talk about transformation that is going on in India, and what is the role of urbanization in this transformation, developmental transformation that is going on. So, I mean, there are a lot of talks of India attaining, becoming a developed country by 2047, and as Kalaji has also earlier said that, I mean, no country in the history of the world has really reached middle income status without substantially urbanizing. So that holds good for India as well. But I mean, what are the messages about this transformation coming for through this particular budget? So I would like to divide this into 4 big areas. One, it's digitalization. The second, it's about infrastructure. Third, it's about climate change and environmental issues. And the fourth is about demographic change. Now, so these are the 4 broad pillars through which I would like to analyze this budget. So coming to this issue of digitalization, so one interesting point that we see in this budget, it's an allocation of 1,450 crores, 1,000 crores under the National Urban Digital Mission. So this is an important step because, I mean, we all know that the Smart Cities mission is coming to an end. The Smart Cities mission has almost run out of its course. So understandably that budget allocation under the Smart Cities has gone down. But what is interesting is that, I mean, and this point I had been also writing about the Smart Cities mission. The major allocation under the Smart Cities mission had been under the area-based development, which had received more than 80% of the Smart Cities fund. Whereas the digital component, that is a pan-city component, had not received adequate amount of funds. But things began to change somewhat from 2018 onwards, when the ministry asked all the smart cities to develop an integrated command and control center. So I think, I mean, since that point onwards, there had been some changes. And I mean, the digitalization started getting more importance. So I see this National Urban Digital Mission is actually the second part of the Smart Cities mission. And there is no denying the fact that as India is moving forward, there is a need to improve management of the city services and improve the efficiency in terms of financial allocations and improve the quality of urban data. And over the last few years, there had been very substantial improvement in availability of the urban data. And so in that way, I think that allocation of specific fund allocation under the National Urban Digital Mission is a very important step. And over the next years, I mean, after the full budget is prepared, I think, I mean, this National Urban Digital Mission will get greater importance. I mean, recently it has also come to light that more than 70% of the urban local bodies in India has improved their tax collection, the tax collection. I think, I mean, this National Urban Digital Mission will further move towards this. And I mean, there are reports that, I mean, it would be used to improve the digitalization of the city governments. So that, I think, on the whole, it's a major step forward. The second issue, big issue, it's about infrastructure and connectivity. So, Gati Shakti mission had been a prime mission of this government, and there had been a lot of emphasis on developing logistics and transportation, and including regional metro rail connectivity. I think that has got a major urban dimension, even though, I mean, the emphasis is on logistics and transportation, connecting to the ports, but the cities are the nodes of the transportation hubs. So this emphasis on logistics and transportation has got a significant urban dimension by itself. And here there is this important issue of the regional metro rails. I mean, like the Delhi Meerut metro connectivity, or in the Bangalore or Hyderabad metropolitan region, there is emphasis on metro. So if we also look at, I mean, this has the potential to improve the connectivity of the suburban areas to the urban core, and improve the urban labor mobility, and emphasize on the centrality of the city. That has, I mean, the transportation corridors can play a significant role in improving the agglomeration effect of the cities. But here, to really benefit out of this, to really have the impact of the transit-oriented development, also we have to plan at the local government level, because the transportation corridors can only become really functional when there is a densification around the transit corridors, when there is also the next level of last mile connectivity, linking the transit hubs to the residential areas, to the industrial areas. So here, that transit-oriented overall development at a metropolitan level, it's a very important step, no doubt. But this step can only succeed when there is a strong local government also in place, and which has got a planning mechanism to emphasize on densification around the transit hubs, like in case of Navi Mumbai, or or in case of Salt Lake in Calcutta. So there has to be a transit-oriented development plan at the local level to really move forward on this point. But then coming to the third point that, I mean, otherwise, I mean, this, if we do not have a local level transit-oriented development plan, then there is also a possibility that, I mean, this metro connectivity and improvement in the connection to the city can cause haphazard land use conversion in the peri-urban areas, which are outside the metropolitan limits and do not have a planning regime or the census towns at the peripheral areas of the city, and lead to filling up of wetlands and water bodies. So there has to be a planning emphasis on this area. The third point that I would like to highlight here is that although India is going through a massive urbanization and we are talking about the cities as the engines of the economic growth, but the fact of the matter is most Indian cities are also facing huge environmental challenges. Most cities are big cities in particular, the metro cities, but also this point is also becoming apparent in the tier 2 cities like Bhubaneswar, etc., where heat stress, air pollution, urban flooding, so all these are becoming a reality. I mean, the problem that is there in the metro cities today, unless they are addressed, the tier 2 cities will also go the same way as the big metro cities. So there is a need for major emphasis to improve the environmental conditions of the cities. But here I don't really see much emphasis on the budget, except for talking about electric vehicles or rooftop solar. So rooftop solar is definitely a move in the positive direction, but it is only a small fragment. So Indian cities require massive amount of funds to improve their environmental conditions, and not just funds, they also require local level capacity. So this is another issue that over the years, what we are seeing is that the capacities are not getting developed at the local level. And so most cases, there is a emphasis even under the smart cities on the role of the consultants. So the consultants are becoming important player in the urban governance setup in India, but the capacities of the local governments are not being developed. So, but without local level capacities, depending only upon the external consultants, can impact the ability of the cities in the long run, because the consultants are essentially they are working on a particular project and has got a profit orientation. So this is one area that, I mean, the budget could have set some direction to improve the capacity level of the capacity in the urban government systems. Fourthly, and the most importantly, is that India is going through a phase of demographic change. There is a large youth population in the city, and most of the youth population are moving from the rural areas to the urban areas in search of jobs and livelihoods. Now here, this appears somewhat of a disappointment that although there is some increase in the fund for MGNREGA, which shows that there is a need for livelihood support for the people in the rural areas, but I do not see any such development in the urban areas. and the National Urban Livelihood Mission, which was the earlier the main scheme, that has practically closed down, except for some funds for the street vendors. So, and I mean, this gap, some of the state governments have come up with their own schemes, but I mean, there is nothing at a national level. I think, I mean, this is one area that requires to be focused upon. So I think with this, I would stop, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Professor Chatterjee, for those comments and the 4 points that you discussed, the strengths and weaknesses within those 4 points: digitalization, infrastructure and connectivity. Climate change is an issue that has been growing over the years. Although a lot of things are being said on paper, they exist on paper, their translation on the ground is not easy. It's not easy to achieve what proposals are mentioned on the paper, whether it's to do with and the worrying part is the delays in transitioning to a green functioning country, whether it's to do with reducing the dependence on fossil fuels or employing other methods of environment-friendly methods of going about doing the work in various sectors, whether it's industry or construction or transportation. Licenses for oil and gas companies continue to be issued despite a push by the UN for reducing use of fossil fuels. And the last point about demographic change, especially the growth in the young population and how much India is prepared to respond to their needs and concerns, because if you don't do it, then other kinds of challenges begin to emerge, which are being witnessed in various ways. You look at the news channels and you see so much of crime and violence and unrest and protest among these communities, which is not a good indicator of governance for any nation. It's a worrying indicator. So thank you very much for sharing your views and for bringing in these various dimensions, which are extremely relevant when one goes about preparing budgets for a country at the national level or at the local level. Thank you for your time. And our moving ahead in this program, the final speaker, Mr. Samir Unhale. Everybody in this group knows him very well, the kind of work that he does in his present capacity, his understanding of urban governance, various dimensions of governance. And Shweta, please introduce Mr. Samir Unhale.
Yes, sir. Now we have Mr. Samir Unhale, who is a visiting senior fellow at IMPRI and also an urban expert. Welcome, sir, and over to you.
So first of all, thank you very much for this opportunity to interact and be a part of this interaction where we have the galaxy of experts at national level. So it's great to be sharing the screen with them. So thanks a lot for IMPRI to allow me to be a part of this deliberation. First of all, this is a interim budget or a vote on accounts of the instead of an annual financial statement. So despite a lot of policy directions, as one might add, are being known we feel the crux of the next priorities would come up in the regular budget that we might be seeing. However, the directions of policies and the allocations and the inferences that one might bring on it, we do feel, I think, the two issues I was listening, one was on the urban livelihood. I think the phase one probably is getting over, and it is generally discussed that one could expect a phase two for that. And so probably could be the case also for the PMAY and the additional the new the mission directed or maybe indicated regarding the middle class and the slums and housing. So I believe I always felt that the line budgeting that normally comes up in the annual financial statements, and when we are moving towards the double entry accounting system at the municipal level, so just one question that came to my mind is whether the time has come, to even to incorporate the principles of double entry accounting even at the national level. So the triangulation, so to say, that we are now seeing in the city budgeting, like, we have the annual financial statements, we have it's not exactly profit and loss, but the balance sheet and the cash flow statements does give a more granular figure and more insights into the way organizations' financial transactions and the flows happen. So it could be just a matter of, discussion at least, whether the annual financial statement, even at the union and state level, could achieve their granularity by having a double entry accounting system. So that was point A. Secondly, I felt this probably was, going through, of course, the detailed reading as such is very honestly not happened from my side. But the general directions that we see, it is still, the continuity of a lot of missions that were declared probably earlier. So I always feel that the urban India entered into the era of missions from 2005-06 when JNURM happened, and now we are seeing the primacy of missions in India's urban system. Probably the constitutional framework of India has something to do with it, because all said and done, urban local bodies are a part of the state list. Despite the 74th constitutional amendment, they still remain the part of the state list, and probably the allocations that the union government is making in this constitutional peculiarity through the centrally sponsored schemes is, I believe, one of the salient features of this, and maybe even the budgets that we are going to will be seeing. And therefore, there has been discussions of the second urbanization commission within the policies, with the deliberations that we are hearing in various states, and also probably another set of constitutional amendments in which probably all the three levels of government can engage into, as what we now call as, the principles of cooperative federalism, in which we see the synergies of all the three levels of government, and we could really expect, the synergy giving better effectivity into the policy levels that the union and the state and the local municipal governments and even the parastatals, which probably are equally rather more strong in some cases. So that was the second point. Third point I felt was the transitioning of India's urbanization, I think, is now, of course, we do anticipate that probably 36% here about is an urban population, and the absolute numbers will be very staggering. Maybe I think will be at least 50 crores, even if we take one base of 140 crores population and 36%, that will be almost 40-45 crores. That's a huge amount. In fact, that will be the second largest urban system in the world. So probably we will, the policy levers that we are trying to use, the financial allocations that we're using to energize or actualize through that policy levers. Now, probably, we probably require a quantum leap from what we have seen earlier, as we say, the phase before the 74th, the phase before the era of missions. Now, maybe 20 years now, we are saying of the era of the methodology of centrally sponsored schemes, so to say, which we are calling as mission. and the challenges that we probably would be facing in maybe 2027, 2030, 2035. The India that urban India that we would be looking for now in 2030s. So probably the preparation needs to start from now, because the time lag that we see in a huge urban system, I mean, like India is, that could be understandable. Like we have almost maybe 5,500 municipalities, and maybe the 728 districts. It's a huge system, and therefore the time lag that we might see from conceptualization to declaring a policy, allocating for it, and then probably starting that acceptance of that within the various states and the municipal governments, adoption of it, the implementation at the various municipalities, and then finally we seeing the results or the impact on ground. So that, I think, journey is probably a very longish journey here, and we would be requiring greater speed from the various partners in the urban system, that they ought to probably connect with each other more, and in that context, I feel this digitalization that we are seeing through the the urban digital mission, and the various elements of that we are seeing through maybe the Udan and the various portalization of missions, the huge data that is getting gathered. Maybe the Finance Commission has come up with I think, a good initiative in which we are seeing the financial data of all the municipalities now getting loaded onto that portal. And I hope once this data is made available to the researchers and academic circles on open source, rather than being just kept through the control of the agency which is probably developing, I think we would be seeing more outcome, more impact out of that data, financial data of the municipalities. The granularity of the data, the hyper localization potential that we are seeing through this urban digital mission, I think should be one of the things we should earmark for highlight for the next maybe 3 to 7 years time horizon that we're looking at. And as was mentioned earlier, the financial, I think they were well mentioned by very erudite scholars who are in this panel, of the allocation that are made within the various sectors, centrally sponsored scheme, the total allocation as compared to the last years, or the trend on that. I believe that has been discussed. So someone who would be, working with the cities together, there are certain questions in my mind which I'm just sharing. These are not any discussions per se, but just points that do come into mind, especially the opportunity that I get to interact with municipal accountant people, probably at a more frequent and larger level. That the cash flows which are required for the municipalities currently, the dependency on the grants which come through the centrally sponsored schemes, and the ratio of self-financing and what municipalities do have. I think this triad of grant financing essentially, and the own financing of municipality either through tax or through other options of land monetization, I think probably some work would be helpful if these regulatory framework which exist within the municipalities and within the financial aspects of a municipalities, and whether allocation on that probably could be more helpful because all India's urban system is this 5,000 and 5,500 municipalities. Irrespective of what people like us do, maybe at state or the central level, the India's urban system is this 5,500 municipalities, and probably the capacity building point was also very pertinently raised. And the urban learning platform, the national urban learning platform, is also there, and all the missions are coming up with a lot of capacity building. We have the central capacity building mission also. So probably one of the one of the peculiarity that I felt with this municipal functioning was the ability to connect of this 4,000, 5,500 or municipalities, the mid-level functionaries of the municipality, who is the municipal engineer, the municipal accountant, the municipal administrative, maybe the head of the departments of municipalities. And we will really, the real wheels of India's urban transformation are going to be these municipal engineers and municipal accountants and municipal, tax officers. And of course, what the national budget has had does function at a national level. So obviously it has its focus as to what it can do. But probably I always felt that the idea of research and real connect of insights that should be done. I always felt that the mission financing is almost of 8 lakh crores, if I'm not mistaken. The allocation of 5 years, it's not 1 year, but the 5 years, including the finance commission and all the missions which were declared maybe for 2021. So that allocation of 8 lakh crores is humongous. I think in the history of India's urbanization, never ever such an allocation would have been made total of all the last, 70 years that we talk of. So, and probably I always feel that the IEC component which all exists in these missions, we should include the element of research into that, which probably doesn't exist now. So probably, like we have the information, education, and communication IEC component, as it is called in all the centrally sponsored schemes or the missions, as we know. So probably the element of research needs to be included more visibly, and it will unlock huge funds for the academic institutions, even for the think tanks. Otherwise, which is just nothing against anything, but it essentially get utilized in the project management units of the consulting companies. No harm with that, because we are looking at partnerships with everybody. So no point in denying anyone's useful contribution to a sector. So I always felt this information, education, communication component is almost of 4 to 5%. That's huge. You look at 8 lakh crores and calculate 5% of that. That would be humongous. So this funds need to be also made available to the academic institutions, to the think tanks, to the interns, the young boys and girls which are coming with great ideas, and associating them with this centrally sponsored schemes or missions, I think should be an issue which can be tried out. And probably, of course, union budget may not be the place for that, but it could ideally be considered into this. So by and large, the directions has already been discussed, but I felt the granularity of a budget in relevance to the municipalities, to the region, is a new area probably which we could work on, in which the budgetary allocations into the mission funding, the grants, the matching contribution of the state government, the own resources of the municipalities, and of course the municipal bond, which last financial budget, of course, there was a substantial discussions onto that. So when we look at the municipal finance and its connect with the union budget, or for that matter even with the state budget, probably creating new avenues beyond grant financing, which essentially for the government is coming from the tax or from the various funds it go, should ideally be tried. And most importantly, always felt that the implementation of the budget, how effective it has been utilized by the municipalities and by the various union territories and the state government, should also be a part of any discussions of budgets. Because we talk of the new budget, but what has the revised estimates of the actual expenditure, which of course might come in the regular budget. This of course was a vote in accounts, with of course some indication on the policy direction. But probably the execution and implementation of the last year's or the year before last budgets, how much percentage is getting implemented, A, B, and what is the impact of that financial allocation which was made and the expenditure which was incurred into the objective. So performance budgets, of course, we have been discussing that for maybe more than 30, 40 years. Or the performance budgeting framework also needs to be mainstreamed in, I believe, the budgetary discourse and even the talks, the discussion that do happen after budget. That as to what has been the execution efficiency, what more importantly is the impact which that funds are supposed to have. If you are talking of Swachh Bharat, then okay, Swachh Bharat was X allocation, Y a budgetary allocation, and maybe Z expenditure. Yes, but now what about the impact on the ground? So probably the along with the financial discussions, probably the discussions of last year's efficiency, I mean the efficiency of implementation or execution and the impact of that expenditure also probably could be mainstream into the discussions of union budget. So by and large, I felt it was a vote on account. So probably we will have to wait till the bigger, the more fuller budget that would come, and therefore the directions were probably indicate, and we'll be seeing the fuller version of the budget in the coming days when the next thing comes up. So probably I would stop here. So thanks a lot, IMPRI, for giving an opportunity to interact with the galaxy of urban intellectuals that we see in the screen. So thanks a lot for that. And of course, as the directions, we would continue with the questions and answers. So thank you, Rumi sir. Thank you, IMPRI.
Mr. Onali, thank you very much for your comments. You covered a lot of ground in your talk, in your speech. You covered many important aspects which have a relationship with the budget in various ways. I particularly liked your point on the need to prepare for the urbanization that India is going to witness in the coming years, and how to plan for it, and what are the main aspects that need to be taken care of as India moves ahead in this journey. Some of the most advanced economies are highly urbanized. When we compare India is about 34% urbanized, and those are 88% urbanized. India is moving in that direction. It has to take along the characteristics of rural areas, ensuring that rural life is not affected, or those who are interested in pursuing rural activities are taken care of in various ways in terms of providing what their needs are, and also for sharing some of the recent developments that are occurring in the field of urbanization. You mentioned about the Second Urban Commission and the point on cooperative federalism that is being given importance at the national level. There's so much of things that you covered. It's very difficult for me to summarize your views, but I would like to thank you. We benefited. We will certainly listen to the recording and understand more and get back to you on anything that is not clear to us through your talk. I would like to thank you on behalf of IMPRI, and would like to move forward in this program by inviting the participants. If any of the participants have any questions, things to share, anything to ask from the distinguished panel of speakers, it's the time for you to do that now. Most welcome. Please let us know, let the organizers know if you would like to say something at this point.
Sir, there are questions in the chat box. I think Mr. Jaspal Singh now.
Yeah. Very good evening, and actually I would like to say that it was a very wonderful and load full of information that I've been got right now. I have some basic questions actually. It's not very big ones, like when we speak about Maharashtra and when we speak about the governance, it's we have to understand one thing, like due to COVID, many elections have been withdrawn, and today when we speak about cities which are actually controlled by municipal corporations, and we have 27 municipal corporations in Maharashtra, and unfortunately none is having any elected member today, because there has been no elections post COVID. Okay. Now, when we speak about governance, how do we see, like, whether the bureaucracy is so good that governance is going to be very good? Like, how do we see it? Because even if we speak about a budget, when any fund that comes from the central, even one of our speakers have also said the same thing, it comes with the conditionality. Okay. Now, these conditionalities, general people will never come to know what exactly it is. Okay. It also comes with the indirect promotion activity of we can say indirect promotion of the central government. Okay. So in such a scenario, the state's role has also become a challenge right now. So I just wanted to know, like, how do you think about those parts? And the third part about mine was about the the industrialization. When we are speaking about, there is a huge transformation that is happening. From manufacturing is closing, it is service industries are taking up, but the the livelihood of the laborers who are semi-skilled for the manufacturing units, they are not able to survive in the service industry. In such a scenario also, how do you see the challenge, like, it's going to happen in the rapid more urbanization that is going to happen, and new industries zones are being created, and these zones come up with tax exemptions and much more things. So up till when there is a facilities or the tax exemptions are available, units do run, and later on they just shut off or they shift away, and again the challenge stays there itself about the livelihood of the the people and the youths, we can say. So there are few concerns that I just kept in mind and let's share with you. Yeah, thank you.
I think these concerns are absolutely valid. You said some very important things. It's surprising that so many municipalities in Maharashtra are functioning without an election held on time. Although the 74th Amendment Act has put a limit of 6 months once the election period is over, you have to have the election within a period of 6 months, next election. And your second point about funds coming with conditionality, yes, that's true. It has many dimensions to it. If you don't put conditions, then there could be a different situation. And hence, sometimes conditionalities are needed, but it has to be taken forward in a fair manner, which you may not be noticing. And that's the concern that you raised. Second, third is huge transformation. Manufacturing is coming up in a big way. Many laborers at the lowest level maybe are not able to survive in these conditions. These are challenges, and if any of the panel speaker would like to say briefly about some of these points raised. Mr. Unale, about the...
Regarding these questions of, the issue raised by the gentleman on the issue, it has been under the judicial process. So it won't be logical for anybody, and for that matter, to comment on that, because it's in the judicial process. A. B, the broader conspiracy and conflict theory, that tends to underlie such questions, I think also needs to be reconsidered, because it's not all conspiracy and conflict. We are talking of, therefore, collaboration and cooperation. That's where cooperative federalism comes up. So if there are conditionalities, it is not to be seen in this conspiracy conflict framework that someone is trying to take powers of that's not never the case. This, as we keep on saying, this is people, this is various expertise that is coming up to coming up to achieve a particular goal. So I mean, I generally I feel that the conditionality part is more of a directions or guidances in which ultimately final outcome is going to be good. So as we keep on saying, out of the 5,500 odd municipalities, they're at the various levels. But when we want people, when we are looking for urban transformation, that's the reason I'm mentioning speed. That speed is the crux here. So if we are looking for speed, then we obviously are looking for some good things to happen. And what are the conditionalities then that are being argued about? It's improving your property tax. So what's wrong if you want to improve your property tax? Obviously, so that's the reason that if we think at this situation beyond the conspiracy conflict paradigm or confrontational paradigm, you will start seeing more of synergies that are being looked at, more of the opportunities of serendipity that is being looked of, and that's the broader frame, and that has been this substantial change in the things that we are looking, in which people would coming up with their expertise and coming together, and then looking at accelerated impact on ground, and therefore we look at all the cooperation and collaborations and that and all the people.
Okay, thank you. We faced a little connectivity issue at your end, but I think your replies must be helpful for the person who asked the question. Any other panel speaker would like to briefly comment on these 3 points or any of the point? Yes, please do.
Yeah, may I speak? This is Kala here.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that judicial overreach and the issue of municipal elections maybe don't have any space in a discussion on the budget because the interim budget is primarily about financial allocation. And I should mention in this context that very similar to Maharashtra's urban local bodies, even Bangalore faces the same problem. We have 198 municipal wards, and the delimitation exercise has been going on, and municipal elections have been on hold for 3-4 years since COVID. So there are no corporators, there are no councillors, and with the result that the ward level committees don't have any forum in which they can place their demands for various infrastructure. So that is entirely a local issue and a judicial problem. So I don't think that there is enough room for us to discuss that here. There are enough things for us to munch upon. So that is my quick comment in response to this gentleman's question. Thank you.
Thank you.
One quick thing that I just want to add here is
Yes.
that there is a forum, Mumbai Citizen Forum. So Mumbai Citizen Forum and Tata Institute of Social Sciences School of Applied Studies, we are coming out with a study right now for looking at the all 228 electoral wards in Mumbai. I'm trying to understand the pattern of city governance in these spaces and how the local governance is coming up, where this whole question about how the people are engaging. So this study is coming out soon, and we have completed the survey, and the study will be coming out with engaging about the engagement with the corporators and how they are working at the city levels and the local levels to understand the city governance.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Bharati. Is there any other question from the participants, by the participants?
I saw one question on the chat box. I saw one question on the chat box regarding solid waste management in cities. Again, I think the participants here should remember that urban development is a state subject. And I think it was really very, very novel in 2014, I think, when the Prime Minister himself talked about a local issue like sanitation and solid waste management. But I would otherwise think that this is an outlier, and usually national governments do not concern themselves with local level issues like solid waste management and sanitation. But if this particular participant wants to know more, they should go back to the state governments, which I think should mandate the importance of data collection, because we don't even know how much of solid waste is being generated, collected, or disposed. because all the estimates being made by researchers on solid waste management in cities is entirely guesstimates, right? Out of the number of trucks that make trips from the city to the landfill sites, and what is the capacity of the truck and the number of trips made and so forth. So I think data management is a fundamental issue here, which I think the state governments rather need to tackle rather than the national government. Thank you.
Thank you for the inputs and advice.
Again, I would like to add a little bit over here.
Please do.
That since you're asking for the solid waste management and the Swachh Bharat Mission Abhiyan is coming out, like very interesting ways in which, they're coming out, and where the women, the whole things, because I'm working with women and then the sanitation also. So the way in which the women are being positioned there, merely as not as the one who, taking away the waste, but they are also considered as a producers, in this whole environment of sanitation management, so then how they are able to have an active agency to the women in positioning themselves, changing them, as a mere persons to transmit. So that they have conducted right now, like Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, just now 2024, President has given away the award, the Women Icon Awards in the solid waste management, and I was one of the panel member to decide the Women Icon Awards. And you can see that very interesting, innovative ways it is happening at the local level with the women collectives for the solid waste management. And then the whole report is out, so you can really see about it. And also the way in which the big waste generators, BWG, how they are coming up in the local level, and how the different state as a state subject is also coming up with their challenges is also something that you can read. The recent report has come out basically in the cities like Pondicherry.
Thank you, Professor Bharti, for the information and your views on this. We are moving towards the end of the program, and I would like to invite or ask the distinguished panel, after listening to various speakers on a variety of aspects related or not related to the budget, if they would have any concluding thoughts in 1 or 2 lines, if they would like to, starting with Professor Chetan Vaidya.
I think one point which was mentioned is a new challenge will be climate finance. And here the green bonds, as mentioned by Mr. Samir Rubale, is very important. And I think we should focus on it, which will also force them to improve their accounting systems and their revenue systems. I think that should be focused on the green bonds. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Sridhar?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rumi. I was listening to all my co-panelists carefully, and some things that came out of this discussion was the extent of fiscal decentralization and fiscal federalism and extent of autonomy the states and local governments should have in this. And again, I emphasize, I think that the national interim budget is not the right forum for a discussion of these things. And we have the Central Finance Commission, we have the state finance commissions, which also determine the devolution of funds from the state to the local governments. And so fiscal gaps, the fiscal health of local governments, I think receive a lot more importance there than in a national macroeconomic budget aimed at fiscal consolidation. But nonetheless, I think these concerns are very, very valid, but it's only that it's a slightly different kind of orientation we have when we discuss the interim budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Mahalaya Chatterjee?
I think she left the meeting.
She left, okay. Okay. And Professor Manjula Bharti?
Thank you. See, one of the things that we need to bring out here is that when we are discussing about the cities and governance as a topic, then even when we're discussing about the national budget, it is important to discuss also from the perspective of the cities, where naturally we will be bringing about the urban local governance as a corollary to this discussion topic of cities and governance. And it's quite natural to bring this issues of urban local governance, even though it is not so much connected to the budget, that because it is a state subject. But then second one that I would like to speak very specifically about is the whole importance about the climate financing that you're saying about, and also the whole question of resilience. How can we think about a community resilience and then how can we build that community resilience, and how can we, as a person who is working with the women, how can we think about a gender counter maps as a community resilience to work with this climate change discourses, where we are bringing in the social vulnerability, which has been accepted by the IPCC 6 report, like into the central discourses, where we are bringing about the social vulnerability, and then the women, tribal, transgender groups becomes a social vulnerable, and how can we bring that question? And the second most important thing is when we are discussing about the localizing sustainable development goal, how can we bring in the 17 goals at the city spaces, and how can we have a very effective institutionalization of that? Like I said in the beginning, social democracy is very important when we are discussing about governance, and social governance and democracy means looking at the marginalized and the vulnerable group at the city spaces. And it is important to see this from the perspective of development, from the fringes, than to discuss the development. So the whole importance of a governmentality, how to govern and who to be governed, and what way to be governed, and what is the strategies and methods to govern this group is important in understanding the budget, which is a political direction of a center. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Bharati. Very useful statements and views. They are coming out very strongly. And I would like to thank you for those. And Dr. Joy Ilamon is present in the gathering.
Yeah, nothing much to add, but very important thing is that we need this kind of discourses in future also, and where the organizations like the IMPRI's role in moving ahead, providing platforms for such discussions and discourses becomes very important for the future. So this itself is very important, this whole conduct of this meeting, because those things are also getting weakened at the moment. So that way, congratulations, IMPRI, and thanks for providing us this platform. Thank you.
Thank you. Grateful to you for your views. Dr. Javed Alam Khan is present.
Yeah, I think nothing much to say, but I would say that there is a need for, localization of SDGs. And but along with that, I would say that the national framework of indicators, which is measuring the SDG, should gather the outcome data at the local level. And I would say that third-party data collection mechanism should be there. Otherwise, we always, listen the government, and sometimes we become the cheerleader. So I think we academician and researcher should think about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. Very useful comments. Professor Chatterjee, Tathagata Chatterjee.
Yes. Yes, I think, looking at the bigger picture about the changing role of the cities. I mean, although we know that in India, in the federal governance structure of India, the cities are state subjects. But we also have to take into consideration that, in global policy platforms like United Nations, in the climate change dialogues, roles of the cities are becoming important. The city governments are important players in the international forum, in the climate change areas, regarding implementation of the SDGs. So I think, the same thing comes about in India. We need to, when we are discussing budget allocation about the cities, we need to also rethink that what is the emerging role of the cities in India's overall national polity. Where do we see the cities coming up? As we are becoming an urban majority country, we need to rethink the changing role of the cities in the federal governance structure. We need to think about what is about the multi-level governance framework, because many of these issues whether we talking about the SDGs or climate change or the economic growth, has got relationships across different tiers and different levels. So we need to, and the budget being one policy statement, budget is much more than just simple economic accounting, but more of a policy statement for the government. We think, there is a position to rethink the changing role of the cities as India is becoming more of an urban nation. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts, Professor Chatterjee. I think it will be a good idea if you, I don't know whether you have written on the things that you are mentioning. It will certainly help many people in trying to understand the dynamics that are unfolding and how things should work for India in the near future. And finally, so thank you very much. Finally, I would like to invite Mr. Unhale. If any thought comes to mind before we conclude, one sentence, two sentences from your side.
I think this issue was discussed earlier that probably the municipalities require a direct GST transfer instead of waiting on grants from the centrally sponsored schemes. So probably the next line, the municipalities of India ideally should be getting at least say X amount. It could be 1%, 2% of whatever that GST that's just kind of at source in the beginning itself, rather than waiting through this fund flowing to it from the finance commissions and from the centrally sponsored schemes. I think that the thing that I think should be tried at least. It might require a constitutional amendment, but well, it would change the financial scenario of municipalities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Unhale, for sharing an innovative idea. I think this is how knowledge spreads. This is how things are taken forward. So I'm sure someday this will happen in our country, and the municipalities would benefit from such approaches. Grateful to you. Thank you. It is coming towards the end of the program. Shweta, unless you have anything to say, I will give my concluding remarks.
Sure, sir, you can go.
Okay. I would like to first thank all the panel speakers for staying till the very end. It's not easy in current times to take out time to remain connected to a platform for a very long period, but I'm very grateful to you. On behalf of IMPRI, I thank you. And there were many lessons to be learned. One of the things that comes to mind after listening to all the speakers is that whether India is following a right approach insofar as allocations for the improvement or development of the urban sector is concerned, and whether we are paying greater attention to heavily financed infrastructure projects in this process, certain communities are being neglected. Is there a case for lopsided development that is occurring in the country? Everybody would want it to be a more balanced kind of an approach, balanced development, so that all the investment that is going into a certain direction is distributed over a larger space. Although there was a socially inclusive and geographically inclusive approach being referred to by the finance minister, but in reality, whether a lopsided development is occurring at the cost of other more needy areas, as some of the scholars pointed out about the vulnerable communities, the rights and concerns of of those who require immediate attention is a cause for worry for many of us. So with these thoughts, I would like to hand over the platform to the organizers, IMPRI, and thank them for giving me and the speakers the opportunity to share our thoughts. Shweta?
Yes, thank you so much. So now with the chair's permission, we can go ahead for vote of thanks.
Please do that. Thank you.
Thank you. As we come to end of today's deliberation, I, Shweta, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks. On behalf of #IMPRI, Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies, I would like to thank all of you for attending today's deliberation, a panel discussion on cities, local governance and interim union budget 2024 to 25. We are grateful to our chair for the session, Dr. Rumi Aijaz ji, and our moderator for the session, Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay ji. We thank our esteemed panelists, Professor Chetan Vaidya ji, Professor Vishwanath Alok ji, Professor Kala Sitaram Sridhar ji, Professor Mahalaya Chatterjee, Professor Manjula Bharati ji, Dr. Joy Alaman ji, Dr. Javed Alam Khan ji, Professor Tatagat Chatterjee, Mr. Samir Unhale ji, for taking part in the discussion and enlightening us. We thank all of our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. We are grateful if you're watching us later on our YouTube channel or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. You may also find more thematic events and book discussions under IMPRI Web Policy Talk series. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.